Hey, it's Jay. I received permission from my loving wife to go on one of the most epic adventures with my hiking brother, Craig, through the French, Swiss, and Austrian Alps. We hiked during the day, explored villages in the evening, and even scratched Oktoberfest off the bucket list while passing through Munich. I'm very excited to take you on this 12-day journey through one of the most beautiful regions on the planet. Now, let's get into it. Craig is a huge Rick Steves fan, and after watching every single one of Rick Steves' European traveling adventures at least 10 times, he came up with a dream itinerary through the Alps. Geneva, Chamonix, Mont Blanc, Zermatt and the Matterhorn, Bern, Grindelwald, Lucerne, Zurich, Vaduz, Innsbruck, München or Munich, Salzburg, Wien or Vienna. He ran it by me and we settled on starting in Geneva, Switzerland. Craig was coming from Indianapolis and I was coming from Jacksonville, Florida, so we decided to meet up at Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. After a classic United Airlines 3-hour delay, we flew overnight to the Geneva International Airport and arrived about 9 a.m. their time. After we went through customs and grabbed our bags, we hopped on a local train and we were in downtown Geneva in about 10 minutes. We walked a few blocks to our Hotel Kipling and totally lucked out because our room was ready to go early in the morning. After showers and a change of clothes, we decided to set out and walk the city. Geneva was originally founded by the Romans, and it became a haven for religious reformers in the 16th century, including John Calvin, which earned it the nickname Protestant Rome. In modern times, it's become a major center for international peace, hosting the United Nations, the Red Cross, and over 200 other organizations dedicated to human rights and diplomacy. First, we walked up to the UN, and then visited a beautiful botanical garden right near Lake Geneva, and spent the rest of the day in Old Town. The next day we picked up our rental car at the Geneva airport and we were off to Chamonix, one of the most legendary mountain towns in the world. Nestled in the French Alps, Chamonix became famous as the host of the very first Winter Olympics in 1924. It's drawn mountaineers, skiers, and nature lovers for centuries. It sits at the base of Mont Blanc, the highest peak in Western Europe, which towers over 4,800 meters. Before the trip, Craig and I picked out about 3 hikes in each location, and then depending on how we were feeling, we selected one of the 3 the day of. This was our first day of hiking, so of course we picked the most difficult one, La Jonction, a 7.5-mile round-trip hike with nearly 5,000 feet of elevation change. This hike was very difficult, but probably one of the most rewarding hikes that you could ever go on. Craig and I started in the village of Les Boissons, which is just outside of Chamonix. We brought snacks and lots of water, and bought a round-trip ticket on the chairlift to get to the trailhead. We weren't actually able to use our return tickets due to my fall. More on that later. The hike starts out in the forest, and then changes to rocky terrain, and then alpine meadows, and then back to rocky terrain, with a ton of elevation gain over a short distance. Craig and I both tracked the hike, and it said we had 4,000 feet of elevation gain alone. We took our time, met a lot of friends on the way, but when we finally got to the peak, we looked directly out at Mont Blanc and where 2 major glaciers meet because it's the junction of these 2 glaciers. We just soaked in all the views. About a mile down from the peak, Craig was leading the way, and I was getting some epic footage with my GoPro. My legs were feeling a little bit tired, and the descent was very steep. Yeah.
I went down there with one pack of time. That easier way. I should have gone that one.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't even see it.
I took a step down off a big ledge and the trail went to the left, but my momentum kept going straight and I went right over the edge.
Shoot! Ow!
Fortunately, it wasn't steep enough for me to tumble off the mountain, but my right leg slammed into some jagged rocks. I didn't think it was broken, but I knew I had a bad bone bruise and a few deep gashes. It was already mid-afternoon and Craig and I still had a few hours of hiking ahead of us. Craig and other hikers near us were super supportive. I really appreciated their care and patience while I limped down the mountain. The chairlift closed at 6 and we hiked by there around 6:25. Dang, that meant we had about another 2 miles of hiking to go. We got back to the parking lot around 7, but what an epic day. I recommend it to anyone who can handle strenuous conditions. Just don't fall off the mountain like me. That night we stayed at the Chalet Hotel in downtown Chamonix. Our room had a pretty good view. The hotel bar was fun and lively, so we grabbed a beer there. This region of France and Switzerland is known for its fondue, so we tried a local place called Les Bivouacs, which had excellent food. The next day we had another big hike planned, but with my leg, we had to adjust a bit. There's a really cool cable car in Chamonix. It's called Aiguille du Midi, and it takes you up to a peak that's 3,825 meters above sea level. Craig and I unfortunately didn't have reservations, so the wait would have been probably about 2 to 3 hours. We decided to move forward with the itinerary and head to Zermatt to check out the Matterhorn. Zermatt is a pedestrian-only city, so you actually drive to a train station, park your car, and then take a train right into town. In town, there's tons of activities. And Craig and I just walked the streets and grabbed some lunch. From town, we took a super scenic train ride to Gornergrat Station. The whole ride was beautiful, and when we finally arrived at the final station stop, we were able to check out these epic views. Took the train back down to Zermatt and decided to have an early dinner because we still had a 2-hour drive to where we were staying for the night in Bern. Google Maps took us the most direct route, and on our way we paid a toll and we were directed to drive on something very shaky that we thought was a bridge. It was pitch black, so we really couldn't see a thing. We paid the toll, which was really expensive, and then we did a loop around.
It's all in German.
And then we found out that we actually had to drive on a train, and the train drives us for this section of the road.
Yes. But it's like this narrow metal tunnel that's like rickety as hell. I've never seen anything like this before in my entire life.
Yeah. Turns out we were on a car-carrying train called the Goppenstein. We were on the train for about 20 minutes, and then we were on our way to Bern. Founded in 1191 by Duke Berchtold, Bern is one of the most well-preserved medieval towns in all of Switzerland. Legend has it that the city was named after a bear that Berchtold hunted nearby, and bears remain the symbol of the city today. They have 3 bears that you can go and visit. Can you guess who is arguably the most famous person to ever live in Bern? He lived here from 1902 to 1909. He worked in the patent office here in Bern, and from here he published his 4 papers in 1905 that revolutionized modern physics. It's none other than Albert Einstein, and you can visit his apartment where his family lived for 7 years. Craig and I spent the morning walking the streets, and we both agreed that Bern would be actually a really cool place to call home. Late morning, we got back on the road and took a short drive over to Grindelwald. This area is just filled with picturesque alpine villages. There were stunning views everywhere we looked. When we arrived in Grindelwald, it started to rain, and most of the towering peaks around the town were covered in clouds. Right next to our hotel, the Eiger Lodge, was the terminal, which offers trains and state-of-the-art tricable gondolas that carry up to 10 passengers all the way up to Eiger Glacier. Craig and I hopped on, and as we climbed, that rain quickly turned to snow. When you get to the Eiger Glacier station, you have the option to keep going on another gondola all the way to Jungfrau, top of the world, a station that puts you 3,454 meters above sea level with a beautiful 360-degree panoramic view. But the snow was so heavy that we decided not to go with the limited visibility. Instead, Craig and I went for a hike in the snow and had an absolute blast.
Alright, Jay's getting set up for the drone. Hoping we don't get arrested here. The Swiss Alps. We are high above the town of Grindelwald. And in the area of the Eiger Glacier.
We are the only people that have been on this trail the entire day that we can tell because there's fresh snow.
The snow actually is helping the leg.
Yeah.
Softer every step.
Yeah. That's incredible.
This is incredible.
Yeah. Definitely one of the cooler things I've done in my life.
When we got back, we celebrated with a delicious beer at the Box, which is a bar next to the Eiger Lodge. And then we enjoyed a really good meal at Alti Post right in town. The next morning was much clearer, and we enjoyed a complimentary breakfast at the Eiger Lodge. Our next stop, Lucerne, but we kinda got caught in a traffic jam. This parade of cows is called Day Salp. It's a traditional Swiss ceremony when people bring their cows down from the mountains for winter. Day Salp translates to Alpine Descent, and the cows are wearing flower crowns and large bells as they return to the valley pastures. Lucerne is another beautiful place in Switzerland. Founded in the 8th century as a fishing village, Lucerne became a major trading hub in the area by the 13th century. Today it has such a medieval charm. Craig and I once again just hiked the streets to get the lay of the land. Stopped in a local brewery called Rathaus, which had excellent beer and pretzels. We then walked over Kapellbrücke, which means Chapel Bridge. It was built in 1365 as part of the city's fortifications. It's considered one of the oldest surviving wooden truss bridges in the whole world. We then walked up to Museegmauer, which is a medieval wall with 9 towers that was built in the 1200s. You can walk along the wall and through many of the towers, and the elevation gives you a really nice view of the city. So Craig and I decided to do a city train tour. It was actually really well done. It takes about an hour, they drive you all over the city, and you listen to the history as you go. So then we both learned a lot, and we knew what we wanted to check out after we got off. It was getting late in the afternoon, and we saw this really cool hotel up on a hill that towered over the city, Chateau Gouche. So normally you can walk up there, but apparently there were some falling rocks, so they had that entrance closed off. We had to take this little cable car up that pulled us right up the mountain, and we were able to have a cocktail with a really nice view. We had dinner back in Old Town, and then walked the city at night. The next morning, we woke up, grabbed some breakfast, and stopped by Aldi to pick up some snacks. We were on our way to Zurich, but stopped through Stoos to do one of the most epic hikes of the entire trip. The Swiss are just so impressive with their ingenuity. Craig and I pulled into a parking lot that was right next to this sheer cliff that towered over the road. There's a little station called Stanzielbahn that allows you transportation to scale this cliffside. As you're riding the tram up the mountain, you're inside these circular pods that stay stationary, and the entire tram rotates around you as the grade of the track changes. At one point, the track is 110 degrees, which apparently is a world record for the steepest tram to climb a mountain. I can't even imagine how the workers laid this track. Craig and I arrived in a village at the top of the track, but we weren't done yet. We were headed to the peak of the mountain so that we could hike Stoos Ridge. We hung a left and hiked up to a chairlift that carried us all the way up to Klingenstock, which is where we started our ridge hike. Remember it had snowed in Grindelwald 2 days prior? Well, it had snowed here as well, and now that snow was a sheet of ice on the trail. So the start of our hike was a little rough.
Just a little slippery.
Just a little bit.
The rest, though, was absolutely gorgeous. The hike's only 2 miles long, but for most of the hike, there's a sheer drop-off on either side of the trail. You're truly on the ridge. When we finally reached the other side, von Alpstock, Craig and I had a beer and some food and enjoyed the view. There were a series of chairlifts that led from this peak back down to the village. And then we just took the tram back down to the parking lot and we were on our way to Zurich. Zurich has a rich history dating back to Roman times when it was known as Turicum, a customs post around 15 BC. By the Middle Ages, it had become a religious and trade center because of its strategic location along many European routes. Over the centuries, Zurich flourished as a hub for finance, education, and culture, evolving into a modern metropolis while maintaining its medieval charm in an alpine setting. Craig and I checked into our hotel, walked the city, and enjoyed a really nice dinner with such a cool atmosphere. The next day, Craig and I had some breakfast, and then we headed east to Vaduz, Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein, only measuring about 62 square miles or 160 square kilometers, is one of the smallest yet wealthiest countries in all of Europe. The Liechtenstein family purchased this territory in the late 1600s and early 1700s from the Holy Roman Empire to gain imperial status. It became fully independent in 1806 with the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. The same family, all descendants of Liechtenstein, has ruled since 1719. But because Liechtenstein was started as a principality of the Holy Roman Empire, there are no kings and queens, just princes and princesses. You can see the palace sitting on the cliff, towering over Vaduz, but you're unable to tour it because the royal family still lives there. The country of Liechtenstein is beautiful because it's surrounded by the Alps. Craig and I were a little underwhelmed by Vaduz, just because there wasn't a rich medieval history like so many of the other cities we had seen. It was nice, but kind of missing character, if that makes sense. We only spent about 30 minutes there. We're going up there. That's what it looks like. Craig and I moved on to Innsbruck, Austria, which I think we both independently said that it was our favorite city of the entire trip. This town seemed to have it all. Here's our hotel, right next to these.
Boom shakalaka.
Tons of pedestrian streets with great restaurants and bars. The Alps are the most beautiful backdrop for the city. There were lots of people having fun, and we just had a good time walking around, grabbing a beer here and there, trying lots of foods, and listening to some live music. The next day, we didn't have to travel to Munich till the evening, so Craig and I decided to scale the Alps right in Innsbruck. We only walked a few blocks and we were able to pick up a train at the Congress station. The train travels through several villages, and then you have 2 cable car transfers to reach the top of Innsbruck. We were really hoping to do a hike along the ridgeline, but the snow was way too deep, and the risk of sliding off the mountain and falling to our death was too great. So after some amazing photos, we decided to head halfway back down the mountain to do a hike below the snow line. Hungerberg was a cool little village, and we were able to pick up the trailhead right there in town and do a scenic loop through the forest. Craig and I really needed some more cowbell, so we were fortunate enough to run into these guys. We took the train back down and had a mid-afternoon lunch in town, and we were on our way to Munich, Germany for Oktoberfest. Oktoberfest, one of the world's most famous festivals, began in Munich, Germany in 1810. The original celebration marked the wedding of Bavarian Crown Prince Ludwig and the Princess Therese. Back then, the royal wedding festivities included horse races, music, dancing, and it was so popular that it became an annual event. Over time, Oktoberfest evolved from a local celebration to an international recognized festival featuring traditional Bavarian beer, food, and folk music. There's also a massive carnival on the grounds. Held each year for 2 weeks at the end of September and to the beginning of October, millions visit from all over the world. Craig and I secured tickets to the Hofbrauhaus tent a few months before we went on our trip. You can enter any tent without a ticket, but it is so busy you might not be guaranteed a seat. We didn't want to chance it, so we definitely paid a premium. One thing that I didn't know is that beer is not served outside any of the tents. So if you do want to get a beer, you're gonna have to find a seat somewhere. I think this was a really good thing because it kept the drinkers away from the families trying to have a good time at the carnival. The Hofbrauhaus tent is one of the liveliest and most famous tents at Oktoberfest. It's known for its energetic atmosphere and its Bavarian traditions that date back to its establishment in 1589. The tent is filled with long communal tables where friends and strangers alike share massive steins of Hofbrau beer, which is brewed exclusively for Oktoberfest. Traditional Bavarian music, played by the live brass band, keeps the crowd singing, clapping, and dancing on benches the whole evening. Craig and I ate, drank, sang, and we high-fived our neighbors and new friends with a common German phrase, Prost! I don't know if I need to do it again, but it was definitely a fun evening. I forgot to mention, when we arrived in Munich, we had dropped off our rental car because Craig and I had booked trains for the rest of the trip. 2 more days, 2 more cities, Salzburg and Vienna. We were a little tired the next morning, but after a good breakfast at the hotel, we walked across the street over to the train station, and after a pretty short train ride, we made it to Salzburg. Salzburg dates back to the Roman times when it was known as Luvavum. The city gained prominence in the 8th century when St. Rupert founded the monastery of St. Peter. It became an important religious and cultural center. By the Middle Ages, Salzburg had become a wealthy independent state, thanks largely to the salt mines nearby, which gave the city its name. Salz means salt in German. Salzburg's the birthplace of Wolfgang Mozart, cementing its place as a center of classical music. Eventually, Salzburg became part of the Austrian Empire, and we just happened to show up by chance during the annual St. Rupert's Fair. St. Rupert is the patron saint of Salzburg, and the whole city had lively markets, folk music, and traditional Austrian foods. All the locals were dressed up in traditional clothing. When Craig and I decided to explore the city, our eyes were immediately drawn to Hohensalzburg Fortress. It's perched atop a hill, and this is one of Europe's largest and best preserved medieval castles. It originates back to 1077, and it was built as a defensive stronghold during a period of political conflict between the Holy Roman Empire and the Pope. It's a really cool place to explore. And it offers these panoramic views of Salzburg and the Alps. The fortress itself also includes museums, historic rooms, and art exhibits. From there, we walked to the Mirabell Palace and Gardens. It was built in 1606, and it's famous for its beautiful gardens, statues, and fountains. And it became especially popular as a filming location for the Sound of Music. There are other prominent landmarks in town, such as the Salzburg Cathedral, Mozart's birthplace, and St. Peter's Abbey and Cemetery. We walked by all these places, but just didn't have time to explore. We'll have to do it next time. For the rest of the evening, we explored the markets, continued to walk the city, and enjoy the festival, which made our experience so unique. The next morning, we jumped on a train and traveled across Austria to its capital city, Vienna. Vienna's history began as a Roman military camp, Vindobona, around 15 BC, strategically located on the Danube. It later flourished as the seat of the Habsburg dynasty, shaping Europe's political landscape for centuries. Vienna withstood the Ottoman sieges in the 16th and 17th centuries, cementing its identity as a symbol of resilience. By the 18th and 19th centuries, it became a center for music and arts, home to the renowned figures like Mozart and Beethoven. Although the city was occupied by the Nazis during World War II and by the Allied forces post-war, Vienna is still a city where imperial heritage meets vibrant cultural life. This is the one city Craig and I felt that as we explored, we barely got to see what it has to offer. You could easily spend 3 to 5 days here. A shout out and thank you to my friend Alessia, who helped us organize our day. We dropped our bags at the Moons Hotel, and the Belvedere Palace was right around the corner. This is a beautiful Baroque estate that displays Austria's premier art collection, including the most popular works of Gustav Klimt. From there, we walked several blocks to Center City, checked out St. Stephen's Cathedral, did a little bit of shopping, and then we ate and did some more shopping at the Nosh Market. It's a lively historic market with vendors selling fresh produce, international cuisine, unique local foods, and it's a perfect place to get a taste of Vienna. If you have the time, stop in Demel, which is a place that makes its own chocolate and gourmet drinks. My hot chocolate was pretty delicious. For dinner, we hit up Ulrich, which had a really cool atmosphere, and the food was delicious. The next morning, we caught an Uber to the airport, and we were honestly sad the trip was over. We had such a blast, and I have to say, Craig was an absolute pleasure to travel with. Definitely a hiking brother for life. If you've been to any of these places and have something to add, or you have any questions about this trip, please leave a comment and I'll try my best to get back to you as soon as I can. Until next time.